My name is Daniel Whittaker. I am 36 years old, recently divorced, and for the last 5 months, I have been trying to restart my life in a way that feels meaningful. I am not the sort of person who ever pictured himself moving into an old, isolated house, let alone one that carried such an unsettling reputation in town. But desperation and opportunity often arrive as twins, and the house that came into my hands was one I never expected to inherit through circumstance or survive in with sanity intact. I purchased the property from my reclusive neighbor, a man named Henry Castor. He was 73 years old, wiry in frame, and always seemed as if the world itself was too loud for him. He lived 2 lots down from the modest rental I had taken after leaving my marriage, tucked away in a crooked house that seemed both forgotten by time and strangely preserved against it. The paint peeled but never fell. The shutters clung on those storms battered them, and the roofline leaned at angles that seemed wrong to the human eye. Yet despite all that, the house stood, stubborn and unyielding. Henry was known in town as a recluse. He had groceries delivered, never drove into town, and when children biked past his lane, they whispered stories about him being a witch, a murderer, or something worse. Adults, of course, dismissed these tales, though they quietly warned each other not to get too close. "Castor doesn't like visitors," they would say, lowering their voices. "Best to leave him be." I would not have spoken to him at all, except one evening when I came home from work later than usual. I saw him standing at the end of my driveway. He looked thinner than ever, his shoulders trembling beneath a heavy wool coat, though the evening air was mild. His pale eyes fixed on me in a way that was both pleading and commanding. When I greeted him, he raised a hand and said in a voice dry as leaves, "You're Daniel Whittaker." "Yes," I said, startled that he knew my name. "You live alone?" It was not a question. "Yes," I admitted, a little unsettled. He gave a small, jerky nod. "Good, then you're the one. I want to sell my house. To you." That was the beginning. The next few weeks unfolded strangely, as if I had been swept into someone else's dream. I learned that Henry had no surviving family, no friends, no ties of any kind that anyone in town could name. He handled everything himself, and, despite the rumors, had never broken a law. His decision to sell me the house came without negotiation. The price he asked was absurdly low, almost insulting for a property of its size. But when I questioned him, he simply said, "I need someone who will keep it. Not tear it down, not sell it on. You will keep it." I signed the papers less than a month later. The night before the closing, Henry came to see me again. This time he held a folded sheet of yellowing paper, creased so many times the edges had nearly torn away. He handed it to me with stiff, shaking fingers. "These are the things you must know," he whispered. His breath smelled faintly of iron and mold. "I don't care if you believe me. Just don't ignore them." The paper contained a list written in tight, slanted handwriting that was hard to read under the porch light. The words chilled me even before I understood them fully. 1. Do not stay in the cellar past midnight. 2. If you hear the upstairs door open after dark, lock your bedroom and wait until morning. 3. The 3rd floor window must never be uncovered. 4. If you dream of the well, do not drink water the next day. 5. On the last night of winter, leave the attic light on until dawn. I looked up at him unnerved. Is this some kind of joke? Henry's face did not change. His eyes were wide, pupils too large, and his voice was like wind scraping through dead grass. "Do as it says, or the house will take you too." Before I could respond, he turned and walked away. His gait stiff and unsteady, his figure swallowed by the shadow of his own crooked roof. When the deal closed, Henry vanished. He did not stay to collect his things, or to ensure the money had cleared. His belongings were still inside the house, every piece of furniture coated in dust, every shelf lined with brittle books and cracked photographs of people I did not recognize. There were no forwarding addresses, no instructions, no explanation. I asked around town, but no one knew where he had gone. Maybe he went off to die somewhere, the clerk at the diner muttered. He always looked half a ghost anyway. I should have walked away then. Should have ignored the too cheap deal, the list of strange rules, the air of something rotten that clung to the place. But I was desperate. My marriage had ended in flames of bitterness. My savings were gutted, and the idea of owning a house, any house, felt like reclaiming a piece of stability. So I moved in. The first days were quiet enough. The house creaked constantly, but old wood tends to complain. The walls seemed to breathe with drafts, and the smell of damp earth lingered in every corner. But that too could be explained. I spent my time sorting through Henry's belongings, deciding what to keep, what to burn, what to simply drag to the edge of the property and leave for the junkman. It was during one of these cleaning sprees that I ventured into the cellar. The door was heavy, its hinges groaning as if they had not moved in years. The stairs were narrow, descending steeply into cool darkness. I carried a flashlight, and its beam fell on stacked jars, broken furniture, and stone walls slick with moisture. The air was thick with mildew, but beneath it I thought I caught another scent, faintly metallic, like rust or blood. At the far end of the cellar was a low stone arch. Beyond it lay a smaller chamber, circular and deeper than the rest. The walls here were carved with shallow lines, not random scratches but deliberate patterns. Circles, spirals, intersecting shapes that seemed to writhe when the light touched them. In the center was a round, stone, capped opening, the kind you might see in a medieval well. The cap was sealed with iron bands, though one had rusted through. I remembered the fourth rule on Henry's list. If you dream of the well, do not drink water the next day. My skin prickled. I closed the flashlight beam quickly and retreated, heart hammering. That night I locked my bedroom door. I told myself it was silly, that I was letting an old man's madness poison my thoughts. But around 2 a.m, I woke to the sound of footsteps above me. Slow, dragging, deliberate. My breath caught in my chest. There was no one else in the house. I had not given anyone a key. Yet I heard the door to the upstairs hallway groan open, and then the steps came closer, stopping directly outside my bedroom. I clutched the blanket like a child, praying the lock would hold. The knob rattled once, twice, and stilled. After a long silence, the footsteps retreated. When dawn finally arrived, I opened the door to find the hall empty, the floorboards undisturbed, the air thick with a fateful, cold odor like extinguished candles. By the third day, I had begun to dread nightfall. I told myself I was tired, that stress and imagination made me hear things. But the house seemed alive with sounds no logic could explain. Whispers threaded through the vents, indistinct but urgent. A tapping came from behind the walls, in patterns too precise for rodents. And once, as I passed the covered third-floor window, I thought I saw the fabric ripple, as if something inside pressed against it, waiting. I considered moving out, even selling the house immediately, but the thought of returning to the cramped rental I had left behind, of admitting I had wasted my last savings, was unbearable. Pride chained me as tightly as fear, and part of me, though I hate to admit it, was curious. The rational part of my mind sought explanations. I told myself the list was superstition, the footsteps illusions, the whispers drafts. If I could catalog the strange events, explain them, I could conquer them. But explanations failed me on the 5th night. I woke again in the small hours, sweating and gasping from a dream I could not shake. I had been standing in the cellar, staring down into the sealed well. The iron bands were gone, the cap removed, and a black, glistening surface stared back. I leaned forward, and in the water I saw my own face. But it was not my reflection. Its lips moved on their own, forming words I could not hear, and its eyes were swollen, waterlogged, staring at me with a plea that curdled into malice. Then the hands rose from below, pale and clawing, reaching for my throat. I jolted awake, throat dry as sand, the taste of mildew in my mouth. I stumbled to the bathroom sink, turned the faucet, and let cold water gush into my cupped palms. But as I lifted it toward my lips, Henry's words echoed in my memory. "If you dream of the well, do not drink water the next day." I froze. The water trembled in my hands, then spilled uselessly back into the basin. My thirst burned, but fear burned hotter. I left the sink running until the pipes groaned, as though to drown out the dream. When I finally shut it off, the silence that followed was worse. It was then I realized something else. The list was not a warning from a madman. It was a set of instructions, a survival guide, and I had only begun to test its edges. The morning after that dream left me unsteady. I walked through the house like a trespasser in my own home, every floorboard groan sounding like a rebuke. The list sat on my nightstand, the yellow paper even more brittle after a week in my possession. I unfolded it again, staring at the ink strokes that had etched themselves into my nerves. Do not stay in the cellar past midnight. Lock the bedroom if the upstairs door opens. The third floor window must never be uncovered. The words carried more weight now. I believed them. Or at least, I was terrified of testing them. Still, a strange thought grew in me. If Henry had written such rules, then he had lived here long enough to know them by heart, which meant he had endured these same horrors, night after night for decades. How had he lasted as long as he did? And why choose me, of all people, to inherit this burden? I did not go to work that day. I called in sick, something my employer had grown used to since the collapse of my marriage and the subsequent unraveling of my discipline. Instead, I prowled the house, determined to understand it more deeply. I started in the attic. The attic was surprisingly clean compared to the cellar, though dust coated everything in a faint gray film. Boxes stood stacked neatly against the slanted walls, their labels faded but legible. Winter clothes, Christmas ornaments, tax papers. At first glance, the place could have belonged to any elderly man too tired to climb stairs. But on the far wall, directly beneath the roof peak, a single light bulb hung from a cord. It was switched off, but I remembered the rule on the last night of winter: leave the attic light on until dawn. Why only then? What happened on that particular night? I reached up, gave the bulb a twist, and it flickered weakly to life. Its glow was dull and yellow, but it illuminated something odd: a series of scratches on the floorboards below. They weren't the haphazard claw marks of rodents. They were symmetrical, forming a wide ring around the bulb's shadow, almost as though something had circled the light repeatedly, unable to cross into its glow. I shivered and switched the bulb off. Descending from the attic, I wandered into Henry's study on the second floor. This room seemed different from the others. The shelves were lined not just with novels or histories, but journals, leather-bound volumes, each labeled with years 1989, 1991, 1994. Nearly every year had a book. They filled 2 shelves entirely. My pulse quickened as I pulled one free, the leather stiff but intact. Inside were Henry's entries, written in the same slanted hand as the list. The early pages chronicled mundane things: the weather, the garden, his health. But soon the entries darkened. March 12, 1992. Heard the upstairs door again. Stayed locked in my room. The scratching at the door lasted until dawn. April 3, 1992. Dreamed of the well. Could not drink all day. Terrible thirst, but I kept the rule. November 29, 1992. The window fabric stirred though no wind blew. Did not look. Will not look. The further I read, the less Henry seemed like a mad recluse, and more like a prisoner keeping records of his captor. My hands trembled as I flipped through the years, each entry repeating the same horrors I had begun to experience. Footsteps, whispers, dreams, warnings, rules. One entry stood apart. Dated February 28, 2001. Last night of winter tomorrow. Must remember light in attic. Always worse when I forget. Heard them in the walls for hours. Never again. I closed the book shaken and placed it back on the shelf. The room suddenly felt too crowded, as though the air itself pressed against me. I left, my nerves buzzing, and retreated downstairs. That evening I tried to distract myself with television, but every sound from the house drew my attention. By midnight, exhaustion pulled me to bed, but I left the list on the nightstand once more, as if its presence alone might shield me. I slept uneasily, every creak dragging me to the edge of waking. At some point in the dark hours, the sound came again. The groan of the upstairs door, the slow, deliberate steps. My body stiffened, every muscle taut with dread. I listened as the steps reached my door. The knob rattled. This time, instead of waiting, I pressed my ear against the wood. From the other side came a faint whisper. My name, not screamed or growled, but breathed, intimate and pleading. Daniel. I fell back, heart hammering. The lock held. The whisper came again, then silence. I did not sleep again that night. The next morning I discovered something new. On the floor outside my bedroom, the dust was disturbed, forming a perfect oval around the doorframe. Not footprints, not claw marks, just a smooth indentation, as though something without weight had pressed itself there. I backed away quickly, bile rising in my throat. That day, I began to drink more heavily than I had in years. Whiskey dulled the edge of my terror, though it did not erase it. By evening, emboldened or reckless, I decided to investigate the cellar again. The iron-banded well still sat in the circular chamber, its cap damp with condensation. I crouched beside it, running my hand along the rusting bands. To my shock, I felt a vibration. Very faint but rhythmic, like something shifting below. I pressed my ear to the stone. From the depths came a sound that could not be anything natural, a faint, wet whisper, almost like words rising through water. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and fled upstairs, bolting the cellar door behind me. That night, I did not sleep at all. I sat in the study, poring through Henry's journals one after another, desperate for answers. One passage struck me cold. September 6, 2005. They came closer last night, whispered my name. Sounded like my wife's voice, but she has been dead 20 years. Cannot trust them. Must never open the door. It was exactly what I had heard. My own name, spoken in a voice that was almost familiar. The thought chilled me more than anything else. These things, whatever they were, did not only know Henry, they knew me. The next few days blurred together. I avoided the cellar, avoided the third-floor window, and stared at the attic bulb as though it were a lifeline. I began marking time on a calendar, counting the days until the last night of winter, still weeks away. But each day brought new manifestations. The whispers grew louder, threading through the vents in the afternoon. Sometimes they seemed to laugh. Objects shifted places when I left a room. Once I returned to the kitchen to find every drawer pulled open, every utensil lined neatly on the counter. Then came the worst. On the 9th night in the house, I woke to silence so complete it roared in my ears. I sat up, sweating, sensing movement in the hallway. I reached for the lamp, but it would not turn on. The bulb was fine, the switch clicked, but no light came. Then, from the darkness of the hall, the knob turned slowly. This time, the lock clicked open. My throat closed in terror. I scrambled back across the bed, but before I could move further, the door eased inward. A draft like ice slid into the room, carrying with it the scent of wet stone. And then I saw it, a figure, half silhouetted in the dark. Tall, too tall, its head brushing the frame. Its arms hung at its sides, hands elongated, fingers too many. It did not step in, it only leaned forward, face obscured in shadow, and whispered again, "Daniel." I froze. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body betrayed me. The figure waited, the air thickened, and then, without sound, the door slammed shut. The lock clicked again, sealing me in. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. When dawn finally came, I stumbled downstairs, determined to flee the house forever. But when I opened the front door, I faltered. The yard outside looked the same, the morning sunlight spilling across the trees. Yet something about it was wrong. The colors too vivid, the air too still. It felt like a painted backdrop rather than the real world. My stomach turned, and I shut the door quickly, retreating inside. That was when I understood the true nature of the trap. The house did not want me to leave. The following days only deepened that impression. Each attempt to step outside left me dizzy, disoriented, sometimes even waking hours later back in the bed I had tried to escape. I tested it twice more, with the same results. Whether by hallucination or manipulation, the house kept me inside. And the list, Henry's cursed list, remained my only guidance. On the 12th day, desperate for answers, I forced myself back into the cellar. This time, I brought one of Henry's journals, hoping for courage. I lit a lantern and set it on the damp stone floor, illuminating the strange carvings circling the well. In the journal, dated July 1998, Henry had written, "The marks are older than the house. Whoever built here knew. They are meant to bind it, but the binding weakens every year. Must never let the cap be removed." I stared at the well cap, at the rust eating away the iron bands. Weakening. Just as Henry had written, a sound rose from below, soft at first, then louder. A voice, not Henry's, not mine, but someone I recognized all the same, my ex-wife, Sarah. Distinct pleading. "Daniel, help me." I dropped the lantern in shock, its glass shattering, the flame sputtering out. Darkness swallowed the chamber. I scrambled blindly back up the stairs, slamming the cellar door behind me. That night, the dreams came harder. The well again, water rising, hands breaking the surface. Sarah's voice, begging me to listen, to look, to open. When I woke, my throat was so dry I could hardly swallow. Yet I did not dare drink. The house had learned my weakness. Sleep became a rare and fragile thing. Every time I closed my eyes, I was dragged back into the same images: the cellar, the well, the rising hands, and voices that knew me too well. Sometimes Sarah, sometimes my father, sometimes people whose voices I could not place yet somehow recognized with a bone, deep familiarity. They pleaded, mocked, cajoled. When I woke, the thirst was unbearable, but I forced myself to resist. Henry's warning had become scripture. On the 15th night in the house, something changed. The voices did not wait for sleep. I was sitting in the study, journal open on my lap, when I heard a whisper directly in my ear. I spun around, but the room was empty. The whisper came again, this time from the opposite corner, then from the ceiling, then from beneath the floor. Each whisper was different, yet all carried the same intent: open, open, open. I pressed my palms over my ears until they ached, rocking in the chair like a madman. When I removed them, the house was silent once more. But the silence was worse, a waiting silence, heavy and expectant. I went back to Henry's journals, desperate for guidance. I flipped through years at random until one entry struck me. March 3rd, 2020. They will try to trick you. They will sound like your family, your friends. Do not believe them. The house has their voices, not their souls. If you answer, you give them strength. My stomach clenched. I realized then that I had already answered, though only in dreams. My whispered replies, "Sarah, Dad," might have been enough. A terrible fear lodged itself in my gut. The days blurred after that. I stopped working entirely, stopped calling anyone. My phone lay dead on the kitchen counter, battery drained, and I did not bother charging it. I had no desire to speak with the outside world. Not because I thought they would not believe me, but because some part of me feared the voices would slip through the line and infect whoever I reached. Isolation became my only shield, though it felt less like protection and more like a slow burial. Around the 20th night, I tested the third floor window. For weeks I had avoided it, keeping the heavy cloth draped across it as Henry had commanded. But curiosity, sharp and dangerous, ate at me. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking louder than the last, and stood before the covered frame. The cloth was heavy canvas, nailed at the corners. The edges fluttered slightly, though no wind stirred. I raised a hand, meaning only to brush the fabric, but as my fingers neared, the canvas bulged outward. Something pressed from the other side. Not a hand, not a face, but a shape that shifted like smoke under pressure. I stumbled back, heart racing, and the canvas rippled violently as though struck by unseen fists. A sound seeped through, a hiss, deep and guttural, filled with rage. I fled down the stairs 2 at a time, not daring to look back until I reached the ground floor. From below, I heard the pounding continue, rhythmic and insistent, like a beast demanding release. It lasted long into the night before fading into silence. The next morning, I found the nails at the corners of the canvas bent outward, the wood splintered. The thing behind the window had tried to claw its way inside. I hammered the cloth back tighter, hands shaking so badly I struck my fingers more than once. After that, I began to understand why Henry had survived so long. He had not fought the house, not really. He had endured it, obeyed its boundaries, lived by the rules as though they were sacred commandments. He had surrendered everything else: family, community, even his sanity, to remain alive within its jaws. And when the years had stripped him bare, he had chosen me. Why me? The question gnawed at me daily. I thought back to the first time he spoke to me, how he had appeared at the end of my driveway without hesitation, declaring me the one. What did he see in me? Loneliness, desperation, some flaw that made me easier prey, or worse, some trait that made me suitable for what came next. The house did not wait for me to find the answer. On the 23rd night, I woke to the sound of water. It was a steady drip, 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 echoing through the air. I sat up confused and saw that the ceiling above my bed was soaked, water seeping through as though from a burst pipe. But the roof of the house was old, dry, brittle. There were no pipes above this room. The water fell faster, pooling on the floor, carrying with it a smell of rot and stagnant earth. I stumbled from the bed, splashing through the growing puddle, and realized the water was not falling randomly. It traced words across the plaster as it seeped down, letters forming one by one in wet, dark streaks. Well, I fled the room, slipping on the soaked boards, heart thundering. Behind me, the sound of dripping grew louder until it was a roar, as though an unseen river had burst through the ceiling. I locked myself in the study and sat trembling against the door until dawn. When I returned at sunrise, the room was dry. No puddles, no stains, no words. Only a faint damp smell lingering in the air. That day hunger gnawed at me. I had stopped eating properly days ago, surviving on stale crackers and sips of whiskey. But now my stomach ached, demanding more. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and froze. Every item inside, Brelk, leftovers, was soaked in black water. The packages floated in it, bobbing gently as though in some unseen current. My throat seized at the sight. I slammed the door shut and backed away, hands trembling. The hunger did not ease, but the thought of touching any of it filled me with revulsion. I forced myself to go without, waiting for the feeling to dull into a hollow ache. By the 30th day in the house, I was nearly broken. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, my body weak from hunger and thirst, and yet the rules kept me alive. I had not stayed in the cellar past midnight. I had not uncovered the window. I had resisted the whispers, the water, the temptations. I had endured, but the last night of winter approached. Henry's words echoed in my mind. On the last night of winter, leave the attic light on until dawn. Always worse when I forget. I circled the date on the calendar, watching the days fall away until only one remained. Fear coiled in my stomach, sharper than ever. Whatever happened that night was the reason Henry had lasted, the reason he had written the rule. And now it was my turn. When the day arrived, I spent it pacing the house like a condemned man awaiting execution. Every window seemed darker, every shadow longer. I climbed to the attic before sunset, checking the bulb again and again, twisting it, tapping it, making sure it worked. The scratches on the floorboards seemed deeper than before, their circular pattern clearer in the dying light. At midnight, I sat cross-legged in the center of the ring, the bulb glowing weakly above me. The house groaned and shuddered around me, as though settling its weight for the night. At first, nothing happened. I began to wonder if it had all been paranoia, if the bulb's glow was merely symbolic. Then the scratching began. It came from the walls, from the roof, from beneath the floorboards. 1,000 claws raking at once, circling me in every direction. The bulb flickered, its light pulsing with each scrape. My breath came in shallow gasps. I clutched Henry's journal to my chest like a holy book, whispering nonsense prayers to no one. The scratches grew louder, faster, until they blended into a shriek. The floor trembled beneath me, the wood warping as though something beneath strained to burst through. The bulb flickered again, nearly dying, then blazed brighter than before. In its glow, I saw shapes pressed against the walls of the attic. Pale hands, twisted faces, bodies pressed flat as though the wood were only a thin veil. Their mouths opened in silent screams, their eyes glowing with hunger. They circled the ring, slamming against it, unable to cross into the light. The bulb's glow held them back, but I knew instinctively that if it failed, they would devour me. For hours they battered the barrier. The bulb flickered again and again, each time dimmer, until I was certain it would shatter. But at last, a gray dawn light seeped through the cracks in the roof, and the bulb's glow steadied. The figures faded, retreating into the walls like smoke dispersing. The scratching stopped. I collapsed, trembling, tears streaking my face. I had survived the last night of winter, but something in me had changed. When I descended the attic stairs, the house felt different. Quieter, almost welcoming. The air was lighter, the shadows less oppressive. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps I had passed some test, proven myself worthy to endure. Perhaps now the house would relent. I ate the last of the stale crackers, drank carefully from a bottle of whiskey, and allowed myself a few hours of dreamless sleep. But when I woke, the list was gone. I tore through the bedroom, then the study, then the entire house, searching every corner. The yellowed paper that had been my lifeline, my gospel, was nowhere to be found. In its place, lying neatly on my nightstand, was a new sheet of paper. The handwriting was the same, slanted and tight, but the words were different. 1. The well is opening. You must be ready. 2. When you hear the voice from the window, answer it. 3. The cellar is no longer safe. 4. Keep the attic dark. 5. You will know the rest when it is time. My blood ran cold as I read the lines. The rules had changed. The new list lay on my nightstand like a sentence written in advance. My hands shook as I read the words again, each one heavier than the last. The rules had changed. That alone was enough to unravel the fragile thread of control I had managed to keep. For weeks, the old list had been my only anchor, a set of commandments that kept me alive through horror. Now the anchor was gone, and I was adrift. The first line struck me hardest. The well is opening. You must be ready. I thought of the cellar, the rusting bands, the faint vibration I had felt through the cap. Ready for what? What could readiness mean when the very foundation of the house groaned with secrets too deep to fathom? The second line filled me with equal dread. When you hear the voice from the window, answer it. For weeks, I had obeyed Henry's warnings, never uncovering the third-floor window, never acknowledging the sounds that seeped through the canvas. Now, this new directive demanded I do the opposite. The thought made bile rise in my throat. The rest was no better. The cellar, my place of discovery, was now forbidden. The attic light, once my shield, must now remain dark. And the final rule, you will know the rest when it is time, was not a rule at all, but a sentence carved in ambiguity. I wanted to crumple the paper, burn it, reject it. But the memory of the first list stopped me. Henry had not been wrong. His rules had saved me more than once. If this new set of commands came from the same source, then I had no choice but to obey. For 2 days, nothing happened. The house seemed calmer, as though it had retreated to gather strength. I prowled through the rooms in silence, waiting for the inevitable. Hunger gnawed at me, thirst blistered my throat, but I resisted. The food in the fridge remained fouled with black water, and every time I turned the tap, the faint smell of rot rose from the sink. I ate dry oats from an old container, forcing them down raw, and sipped from the bottles of whiskey until each swallow burned more than it soothed. On the third night, the window called. It began with a faint tapping, like fingernails on glass. I froze in the hallway, staring up the staircase. The sound came again, rhythmic, deliberate. My hands shook as I climbed, every step dragging like lead. When I reached the third floor, the canvas over the window pulsed gently, as though something pressed against it from outside. Then a voice seeped through. Not Sarah this time, not my father. This voice was my own. Daniel, it whispered, let me in, please, I can help you. My blood turned to ice. It was not merely mimicking people I loved. It was mimicking me. The words, the tone, even the cadence of breath. I staggered back, nearly tumbling down the stairs. But the new rule echoed in my head. When you hear the voice from the window, answer it. I licked my dry lips, trembling. What do you want? I whispered. The canvas shuddered. My voice answered, faint but clear. I want to show you the truth. Open the cloth. Just a corner. Enough to see. Every instinct screamed no. Yet the rule pressed on me, heavy as gravity. With shaking hands, I reached up and pried one nail loose from the corner of the canvas. The fabric fell back just an inch, exposing a sliver of glass. What I saw nearly drove me mad. It was night outside, yet not the night I knew. The world beyond the glass was black, the trees twisted into skeletal forms, the sky veined with red like cracked flesh. And there, pressed against the glass, was my own face. But not my reflection. It was me, grinning too wide, eyes swollen black, teeth long and sharp. The other, me pressed a hand to the glass, fingers boneless and writhing. Its mouth opened, and the voice, my voice, spilled out. We are waiting. The well is opening. You are chosen. I ripped the canvas back into place, driving the nail through with such force the wood splintered. The voice cut off immediately, replaced by a hiss that vibrated through the walls. I fled down the stairs, gasping, heart hammering. That night, I did not sleep. The whispers filled the house, circling, pressing, repeating the same phrase in dozens of voices. The well is opening. The well is opening. Over and over until my skull felt ready to crack. By morning, I could no longer deny it. The new rules were not guidance for survival. They were preparation for something worse, something final. I avoided the cellar, though I felt its pull with every passing hour. The floorboards above it seemed to vibrate faintly now like a drum beat. Sometimes I caught a faint draft rising from the gaps, damp and cold, smelling of earth and old stone. Once, I even thought I heard water dripping below, though the cap should have sealed it. The well was indeed opening. The attic became a place of terror. The light bulb, once my shield, now mocked me with its uselessness. I could not bring myself to turn it off, though the new list commanded it. Every night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining what waited in the dark above me. Eventually, my cowardice won. I left the light on, clinging to its protection. If the new rules demanded I extinguish my only weapon, then perhaps I was doomed regardless. On the 35th day, something new happened. As I wandered the hallway, I heard a soft thud behind me. I turned and froze. There, on the floor where nothing had been before, lay another sheet of paper. I picked it up with shaking hands. The writing was the same, but the words were fewer. You are almost ready. The door will open soon. No list of rules this time. No guidance. Just a promise, or a threat. That night, the house began to shift. I do not know how else to describe it. The walls groaned, the floor tilted, the air thickened. It felt less like a house and more like a body, stretching, flexing, preparing. I clutched the journal I had been reading. Henry's words a small comfort, and whispered to myself over and over, survive, survive, survive. The window called again, but I did not answer. The whispers rose from the cellar, but I did not go. I broke every new rule, clinging desperately to the old ones. But the house seemed to know. It seemed to punish me. Around midnight, the lights in the entire house flickered out. Darkness swallowed everything. I stumbled through the rooms, searching for matches, candles, anything. My hand brushed against the wall, and to my horror, the wall pressed back. It bulged beneath my palm like skin stretched over muscle. I jerked back, gagging, and heard the faintest sound. Breathing. The house was breathing. I fled to my bedroom, barricaded the door with a chair, and sat trembling in the dark. The whispers rose again, but this time they were joined by footsteps, dozens of them, circling the room. I pressed my hands to my ears, but still I heard them, inside my skull. Chosen, they whispered, chosen. By dawn the noises faded, leaving me hollow. I slept in brief, restless snatches, waking each time to the sound of distant water. Always water. On the 36th day, I found the cellar door ajar. I had locked it days before, but the lock now hung broken, twisted as though by enormous force. A faint damp smell rose from below, stronger than ever. I stood staring for hours, paralyzed. At last, I forced myself to shut the door again, nailing it closed with trembling hands. But as I hammered, the wood vibrated beneath my blows, pulsing like a heartbeat. I knew then that my efforts were pointless. The house wanted the well open. It was only a matter of time. That evening, I returned to the study and pulled down one of the last journals I had not yet read. The entry on the final page stopped my breath. March 15, 2017. The house is not a house. It is a mouth. The well is its throat. I have kept it sealed as long as I could, but my strength is gone. When I die, it will need another. That is why I chose Daniel. He will last longer than me. I dropped the book, bile rising in my throat. The words confirmed what I had feared. Henry had not chosen me by chance. He had chosen me as a replacement. I was not a victim of bad luck, not a random inheritor. I was selected, groomed, delivered into the jaws of something older than stone. That night, the window voice returned one last time. My voice, clear and commanding. Daniel, it said, it is time. Open the well. I wept, rocking back and forth on the floor, clutching the journal. The rules, the whispers, the horrors, they had not been to protect me. They had been to shape me, to break me down, to mold me into the next keeper. The house was not only alive, it was hungry, and I was its caretaker now. I did not sleep the night after I read Henry's final journal entry. His words carved themselves into my mind, repeating over and over like a chant. The house is not a house. It is a mouth. The well is its throat. He had chosen me, not for kindness or mercy, but as a sacrifice. The realization did not shatter me. It hollowed me. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, barely noticing the walls pulsing, the whispers sharpening, the air thickening. It was as if the house no longer bothered to hide its nature. It no longer needed to. The morning of the 37th day brought a silence that terrified me more than any whisper or shadow. No footsteps, no voices, no scratching. Even the birds outside were absent, the air so still I wondered if time itself had stopped. I wandered from room to room, waiting, but the quiet persisted, pressing down until my ears rang. It felt like the pause before an executioner's blade. By dusk, I found myself at the cellar door again. The nails I had driven into it were bent outward, twisted like soft clay. The door hung slightly open, a damp draft spilling out, carrying the smell of earth and stagnant water. I knew then that resistance was over. The well was opening whether I wanted it or not. I descended with a lantern clutched in one hand, though the flame did little against the dark. Each step groaned under my weight, as though warning me to turn back. At the bottom, the chamber glistened with moisture. The carvings on the walls slick with condensation. The iron bands around the well cap were nearly corroded through, rust flaking away in wet chunks. And from beneath, I heard it clearly now breathing. Deep, slow, tidal. The sound filled the chamber, vibrating through the stone, rattling in my chest like a second heartbeat. I stumbled back, pressing against the wall, but the carvings burned cold against my spine. The breathing grew louder, shifting into words, dozens of voices at once, overlapping and layered. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. I clutched my ears, but the voices were inside me. They were not speaking to my body. They were speaking to the marrow of my bones. And then, with a groan like mountains splitting, one of the iron bands snapped. The well cap shifted, lifting slightly, water seeping through the crack. The black liquid glistened in the lantern light, and a stench rolled out that nearly made me retch. Hands rose from the gap. Pale, thin, clawed fingers grasped the stone, pulling. The cap slid further aside, another band breaking with a shriek of rust. Water sloshed, spilling over, but it was not water, not entirely. It wreathed, thick and dark, moving with a life of its own. Faces appeared in it, human and not, their mouths open in silent screams before dissolving again. I screamed, the first real scream since this nightmare began, and fled up the stairs. Behind me, the cellar thundered as if something massive shifted in its depths. I slammed the door shut, but it did not matter. The sound carried through the floorboards, the whole house vibrating with the rhythm of the thing's rise. The rest of the night blurred into madness. The walls warped, bulging inward, as though something enormous pressed from the other side. The floors pulsed wetly, and black water seeped up through the cracks, pooling in the rooms. Every mirror in the house cracked simultaneously, shards spilling across the floors, each fragment reflecting not my face, but dozens of others twisted, decayed, grinning. The voices no longer whispered. They screamed. They called my name in unison, demanding, commanding, exulting. Daniel, open. Daniel, chosen. Daniel, now. I fled to the attic, the only place that felt remotely safe. I clung to the light bulb cord, flicking it on, though the new rules had told me to keep it dark. The glow filled the space weakly, but enough to push back the shadows. The scratches on the floorboards were fresh now, gouged deep, circling me in tight spirals. As I sat trembling in the center, I realized the house had herded me here. This was not refuge. This was ritual. Hours passed. I lost track of time. The light flickered, steadied, flickered again. Below, the sound of rushing water grew louder, as if the well had erupted into a river. At some point, exhaustion claimed me, and I slipped into a fevered dream. I stood at the mouth of the well, But it was no longer in the cellar. It yawned in the center of the world, vast and endless, the earth around it crumbling into darkness. Shapes rose from its depths, countless figures writhing in black water, their faces familiar and strange. My ex-wife Sarah, my father, people I had known in childhood, even Henry, his pale eyes wide with terror. They reached for me, their mouths open, voices layered together in a single command jump. I awoke with a scream, sweat soaking my clothes, throat raw. The bulb above me flickered violently, buzzing like an insect caught in glass. And then it went out. The darkness that filled the attic was not ordinary. It was heavy, textured, alive. I heard movement all around me, claws scraping, bodies pressing, mouths opening. Dozens, hundreds. They circled, pressed against me, yet did not touch. They were waiting. The lantern flickered to life on its own, though I had not touched it. Its weak glow illuminated the paper lying on the floor before me. A new message, written in the same tight slanted hand. Now you understand. The mouth must feed. The air split with a roar and the house convulsed. The floor cracked, the walls bowed, the ceiling split. Black water gushed upward, flooding the attic, dragging me toward the center of the spiral of scratches. I fought, clawing at the boards, but the water carried me, cold and thick, filling my mouth, my lungs. I was pulled downward through the floor, through the house, into the cellar. The well cap was gone now, shattered stone floating like driftwood in the flood. The throat gaped wide, swallowing everything. Faces pressed against mine, hands grasping, pulling me deeper. I tried to scream, but only bubbles spilled out. In that moment, I saw it clearly. The house was only the surface, the mask. Beneath it lay the true thing, vast and incomprehensible, older than any stone foundation. A mouth that spanned beyond the earth, a hunger that no amount of flesh or soul could satisfy. And I, Daniel Whittaker, was not its victim. I was its servant. I remembered Henry's words. I have kept it sealed as long as I could. When I die, it will need another. That was the truth. The house did not kill its chosen. It kept them, twisted them, made them its keepers. Not to escape, but to endure. To pass on the burden, generation after generation. Each one feeding it just enough to keep it sated but not full. The black water closed over my head. My lungs burned, my body convulsed, and then, impossibly, I breathed. The liquid filled me, searing my chest, but it did not drown me. It became me. My vision blurred, then sharpened again, the darkness alive with shapes. They surrounded me. The keepers before me, their eyes hollow, their mouths whispering in unison. Welcome, Daniel. I do not know how long I drifted there, suspended in the well's throat, watching faces rise and dissolve in the current. Days, months, years, it no longer mattered. Time had no meaning. Hunger was all. And when I finally opened my mouth, I found I could speak with the others, my voice merging with theirs into the chorus. The house above waits now, quiet, patient. To any who pass, it looks abandoned, leaning. Just another relic of a forgotten man. But inside it breathes, it waits. And I wait with it. The list lies ready for the next one.